Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I stitch, almost embroider, a pine tree. Now it fits into the slow stitching realm because I'm not using a pattern. I'm choosing some colors and then making just a straight stitch to create the branch, the tree trunk, and all the little pine needles. I'm kind of doing it a little bit abstract, a little bit whimsical, but with a really strong element of realism. You can actually see all the pine needles. Now you can vary this technique by varying the colors, and I'll give you the exact colors I use of embroidery floss. You don't have to use all three. You can use more than three, you can use just one. It's really up to you, and you can make this as large or as small as you want. And I'll show you all the techniques I use, from the design process all the way to completion. So let's get started. So I want to take you through the steps of embroidering a simple little pine tree that has a realistic element to it, and you can design it whatever size you want. Now I'm going to show you it at a medium level. You can make it simpler and you could certainly make it more involved. But this is the basic steps I use to make a realistic looking pine tree. You can easily turn this into a Christmas tree if that's something you're looking for, but this is really like a tree that you'd see in the forest. So I have two pieces of fabric here. I have this piece of little muslin. It's just a very plain piece of fabric and it's very thin. So I chose a backing fabric for that. So I'm just going to set that down and I'll just add a pin or two to hold it in place. Again, I could trim both of them up because I'm not going to finish this project today. I'm just going to create the tree, and from there I'll have an element that I can use in my slow stitching. Now the hardest part of this project is actually the design work. The stitches are just really basic stitches. They're pretty much the straight stitch to make the little pine needles, and then just some fun stitches to make the trunk of the tree. So to make the design, I like to start with two different colored markers. These are erasable with heat, and this is just my guide. So I'll start with one here, and I'm just going to sketch the trunk of the tree, and this also gives me the height that I want. So right here, it's not a very tall tree. I also know I want the base to be a little thicker than the top. So I'll just create like a long, skinny triangle here, and I can stretch it out a little further. Now I'm not going to stitch all the way up that tree because the trunk of the tree is actually hidden by branches and spots. So I'm just going to randomly stitch to fill in that tree. I'm also going to fill in just a few little areas for branches. So I like to start here, and I just ever so often create a little branch. And it's a guide. I'm going to certainly stitch in more branches as I go. But these are the areas that I'm going to start with my brown color for the trunk. From there, I'm going to want to start the branches. And for that, I have my other color marker because I really want to develop the shape of the tree. So I'm just going to kind of make a little triangle, and that gives me not only the height of the actual branches that I want, just a rough guide. I can even elongate it just to make it the right size. Now I don't want my tree to be a perfect triangle. This is really just a guide. So from here, I'm just going to create a few more branches, and some of them I'll split. Some of them will be a little shorter than others. And this is just giving me the idea of what I want to create for this pine tree. What's really going to fill out the tree, though, is going to be the needles. So that's a very good beginning. For my trunk, I have two colors. I have a brown and a black. You can take apart your threads. You don't have to use all 6 of them. I'm going to use all 6 today. But I have just these two DMC colors. You don't have to use the same colors. It's a really solid brown and a black. The colors, though, in case you are following, is the 310 in the DMC for the black, and for the brown it's 801. They have a nice little satin sheen to them, only because I like using them. There's no other reason for it. So to create the trunk, I'm going to start at one side of the trunk. Because I'm right-handed, I'll start on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to create a series of stitches right at the base. Some are going to be long and some are going to be short, and they're only about a 1/4 inch long, the longest one. And I'll skip a little area. I'm just creating basically the perimeter and a slight angle to my stitches. Then I'm going to just jump ahead and continue building up this trunk again with the straight stitch. Some will be larger than others. I'm still following that purple guide. Some will be closer together than others. You can use an embroidery hoop for this as well. I like the flexibility of the fabric. And I'll just go back in there and make little small stitches, again going in the same direction, up and down, but with a slight angle, just to make that tree trunk and to make it a little tapered. So I'll continue doing this all the way up to the top, making my stitches less thick each time, and by that I mean just maybe 1 or 2 stitches thickness for the trunk, and then gradually working to just a single stitch thickness. Now, as you can see, I'm leaving a little space between them. I'm going to fill that in with a little bit of the black, and I'm also going to leave some of that area just blank because my pine bows and needles will fill in that area. And as I get to the top of the tree, my stitches will just shorten just ever so slightly. So now I have just a very abstract trunk of the tree. I'm going to continue to work my way down, adding a few stitches, still going up and down, but this way going down. And I'm also going to add just a little bit of a beginning of a branch on each side of the tree. Not very thick, but always maintaining that angle that I sketched out. And again, it doesn't have to even meet the trunk. There can be a little space in there. We're creating just the hint, the suggestion of the branch. As I get lower and lower, the branches will extend further. And I'll also start to fill in a little more of the trunk of the tree, creating a thicker base. If I skip some areas to make the branches on the side of the tree, that's totally fine. I'll fill those in with pine bows. So there I have my trunk and just a few branches. I'm going to set aside the black because I'm going to use it to fill in some of these spots, but I want to get started creating those pine bows. So I have these 3 colors here, a bright green, and this is by the brand Iris, and it's 963. It's just a bright green. I have this silvery green, and this is by DMC 502. And then I have what I call a mossy green here, and this is 3347. So it gives me a little variation. You can add more colors, or you can only add just a single color, and that's up to you. What I want to do is start with this bright green, because this is going to be kind of my main color, but you can choose any of them to be your color. And I want to start right at the top here, and I'm just going to stitch 2 stitches straight up, and this gets me the top of my little sketch. Now from here I'm going to work my way down, pointing my stitches away from the tree and staying somewhat symmetrical. If one is a little longer than the other, that's okay, but I'm just kind of balancing it out. Now after I have that first one done, I'm going to come in here and create a branch off of this little one that I've already sketched in. So to do that, it's the same procedure to do it for all the branches. I'm going to stitch a little stitch, and then from there create an angled stitch from it. And then I'm going to create a few more stitches leading to that branch. At the top of the tree, I want them to be fairly small, and the pine needles will only get incrementally larger, but very slightly. They're not going to be that much larger at the base of the tree. There's just going to be more of them. So here I have one branch with my green. I have my top, and now I'll do one more branch to show you how it's done, and then I'll stitch all my green before I come back in with my additional colors. So here I'm stitching just a few lines, just a few stitches that are going to be the pine needles. They're not parallel, they're all moving out from that branch. The branches will get a little longer as I go down, but not every one will be longer, won't be in order. So this one is a little wider than this one, but my following branch will be wider than this. And that gives the tree a little bit of balance. You don't have to do it that way. If you want all your branches to get wider as they go down, that's a totally different look, and that's very effective as well. It's really what you like. But what I'm doing is keeping all my little pine needles branching out from the tree, and I'm not filling in the tree as I go. Now I'll do one more branch here and I'll show you how I split it. So I'll start closest to the trunk of the tree, and I'm going to bring this branch and I'm going to bring these pine needles very close to the tree. And then I'll go underneath, bringing my needles up to that little brown branch that we made. Again, keeping them nice and small. And now, because I want to split the branch, I'm going to have this one go out here and this one continue. So while I'm not stitching on that line, I'm bringing all my little pine needles to that line, following that direction. That's where they're emanating from, and that gives the appearance of a branch. And you can take this as far as you want. I might even go one more than I've sketched down here because I like the way that's starting to grow the tree. Now, because it's a split branch, I can go underneath that first branch and add a few needles as well. Again, coming from the tree. And then I'll take advantage of that split and create some needles coming from that. Now I'll continue this with the green all the way around my tree to my lowest branches. And then we'll come back and start adding our second color, and you'll start to see the tree develop. So now I finished with the green, the bright green there, and as you can see, I've created the beginning of some branches. If the branches intersected, I didn't stitch over the stitches. I just kept one layer of stitches. At this point, I'm going to start with a different color here. I'm going to take this mossy green, and I'm going to start filling in spots, and I'll start at the base here. I'm keeping my stitches in the same direction that the first layer went into, but I'm still trying to maintain the branches. So my stitches will follow the line of these branches that I created, even though I didn't add the brown to them. And I don't have to do every one. It's just on occasion where I want to add just a little shadow or highlight, just a variation in the color that we first put down. So I'll stitch around. Again, you can see it starting to fill in, and it's also starting to be really lush. The tree is really filling out with the addition of the color and the additional little pine needles that I'm stitching in. And I'm not hesitating to cross over some of those brown stitches, because that's how you hide the trunk of the tree. Or not even intentionally hide it, but just make it look natural, that the branches cover some of that trunk. So I'll continue again with these small stitches. I'm maintaining them the same size, approximately, as those green stitches. And I'm just throwing in some of this mossy green every now and again. I want it to be balanced, so I'm not going to try and go overboard with any greens. I'm not trying to compete with the first layer I put down. I just want to enhance it and complement it with these stitches. So I'll continue to do this. So there, I finished stitching all of the mossy green, and now I want to add my final stitches, which are of that silvery green. So again, I'm just going to look for areas that are blank, and I'll just stitch in a few little stitches here and there. So I stitched in my first color, which was about 85% of all of my stitches for the pine needles, and then I did my next color, which was about 10%, and now I'll just add the remaining few stitches. And this third color gives it a little more dimension, a little more interest. I don't have to fill in all the areas, just enough to make it come to life. You could of course go in with additional colors besides. Maybe a really dark color would be a nice touch here. So I've stitched all my greens. I have all 3 greens on the tree. The pine tree looks adorable. I do want to take in the black thread and just stitch on the trunk some of the areas that are bare. And I want to make these stitches very small. They're just really adding a shadow to the existing trunk. It just creates a little variation and a little interest, a little more dimension to that tree. I can always go back in there with some more brown if I want to fill in any spots, but I'm really just looking to add a little bit of definition here. I'll continue going up the trunk of the tree, again with very small stitches, just to fill in some of the spots and add a little shadow. And there I have my embroidered pine tree. I didn't use a pattern. I created a sketch and just branched out from there. So that's how I embroider my pine tree. It can be used just as a pine tree, or you can doll it up and make it a Christmas tree during the Christmas season as well. I think it's a really beautiful element to add to your slow stitching pieces. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.